Well, hello again, dear listeners. I hope you are doing fantastic. I know I am doing fantastic right now, and hopefully by the time this is live, I'm still doing fantastic. I won't know because I record this before it goes live, obviously. Yeah, so I hope you are ready. This video is going to be 5 paranormal stories. Kind of going back to the roots of the first video. 5 paranormal experiences, stories, however you want to put it. Yeah, in my opinion, these are fantastic stories, and I hope you genuinely enjoy them. If you do, please let me know in a comment, thumbs up, like, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. I'll say that again at the end, so you don't have to worry about what I just said. It's not even important right now. Anyway, yeah, so here are 5 terrifyingly true paranormal stories from Reddit. Enjoy. At like 8 o'clock last night, my grandfather, who I live with, gets a call from an out-of-area number on our home phone. He answered, and, according to him, I screamed and sobbed into the phone asking for him to help me. My grandpa obviously panicked from this. He tried to respond, but couldn't really get any words out right. From upstairs, I hear him talking, and I'm wondering if we have someone over, so I go downstairs. And I see him hunched over and anxiously talking into the phone in the corner of the kitchen. He can hear me walking down the stairs, turns around, and then he started yelling into the phone, asking whoever it was who they were, if they thought they were funny, etc. According to my grandpa, the phone then went silent, and a deep male voice said,
"I can see you right now, Bartholomew."
At this, our doorbell rang, and we heard a car sharply pulling out of the driveway. I went to the front door, and there was a severed goose head left on our doorstep. We immediately called the police, but haven't gotten anything back yet. I still don't know if this was some sort of paranormal or supernatural thing, or just some sick person trying to scare and hurt us. I don't know if or how the person was able to sound like me, and I don't know how they knew my grandfather's name, considering he had it changed in the 60s to Thomas in order to honor his deceased father. We're still very shaken, and I personally can't even imagine how scared my grandfather must be after this. So I'll give a little background information here before I dive into what I experienced, which is bringing upon my question. In May of last year, a boy who I had gone to primary school and high school with had passed away after a particularly nasty infection spread from a cut on his foot and basically shut his body down. His death rocked the entire school, which he and I, along with many others who basically grew up with him, and we were very much affected by this sudden and somewhat unexpected death. I was especially sad over his passing, even though I hadn't been too close to him. So I attended his funeral and spent a few weeks in a numbed state trying to process his death. This afternoon, I was asleep for a few hours before waking up in what felt like sleep paralysis, except I could talk and hear myself saying things, but I couldn't move at all. There was a person sitting on the end of my bed, so I asked who they were. They turned their head to look at me, and it was the boy who had passed away. He and I spoke for a few moments about our school, my life. He gave me advice on a few things. Finally, I asked what he was doing here, to which he replied, just checking in. I do that quite often to make sure everyone's okay, before joking that it was easier for him to talk to people in this state than when he was in my state. Normally in my sleep paralysis, I have a sense of dread and fear, but this one, it was very calming, and it felt as though it was a real conversation that I would have had with him. He was very kind, and he just sat there at the end of my bed playing with his shoelaces. After our conversation was over, he reached over to touch my hand and said to me, "My time here with you is over, but I'll make sure to let you know if I come around again. I'll look out for you," which was one of the last things he said to me before passing, and then goodbye for now, before disappearing right in front of me. As soon as he had disappeared, I was able to move again and sat up in bed. I didn't wake up how I normally do with sleep paralysis. I just sat up and boom, I was awake. Now, I'm a believer in the paranormal, and I believe there is a physical world and a spiritual world, which is where people pass on to when they die. I think that sometimes people's spirits get trapped in a sort of limbo between the two worlds, and that's where we, the beings who are alive, are able to see and communicate with the spirits. I've never heard of an experience quite like this one with sleep paralysis, and I believe it was the spirit of the boy visiting and checking in on me. Could that be possible? Do some spirits manifest themselves in this way and just randomly pop in for visits and chats? This next story is a true story from someone referring to themselves as the twin music artists, Kadam and Kadis. As you could tell, they're music artists. I will go ahead and tag all their social media accounts down in the description, but they did say that I should push you guys towards their stuff on Spotify and Pandora. That said, if you're interested in another musician, go ahead and check them out. They are under the name MetaNoiz, that is MetaNoiz, and this is their story. My brother and I are identical twins. We experienced our share of strange things throughout our lives, but for some reason, this always slips my mind, probably because we were so young. This was an almost daily occurrence from 4 years old to about 9 maybe. Anyway, when we were younger, we basically used to see shadow people running by in the corner of our eyes. All the time. It's crazy because I never thought I'd write about it because it doesn't bother me, and I do believe in another possible dimension. I believe if you don't, you're naive. What I'm saying is, I'm not looking for answers per se, I'm just sharing my peculiar story. We grew up as Christians, so every time my brother and I would tell our mother that we saw a shadow, she would remind us that if it didn't scare us, it was a good spirit. If it did scare us, we should rebuke it in the name of Christ. What I find so funny about this is that I remember my mother reminding us all the time. Our mother had to actually come up with an elaborate reasoning behind us seeing dark figures running by. It actually became so frequent as a child. I could remember that I hated to look at certain darker areas and places and would try to take creepier parts of the house out of my peripheral to avoid seeing them. And I can remember when I would look, it would actually frustrate me that I'd see a shadow run by because I'd think, see, I knew it. I thought I'd always see them, and so did my brother, but neither of us do see them anymore, at all. It's weird to think I even almost forgot it used to happen because it was such a common occurrence in retrospect. These days, the closest we come to seeing them is when we trip on LSD and we see the usual trippy shadows, but that only reminds us of the shadow people. It's not the same. As a kid, these weren't just trippy shadows moving. It would just straight up look like dark legs and arms running right by our peripheral vision usually. Same for my brother. I'd also add that we've had cases where we've seen them back to back, as in I would see one, and so would he, without either of us knowing that we both just saw a figure, and then we would just talk about it later. One time I ran to my mother with the usual, "Mom, I saw one again." This one scared me, but it was the kind I normally saw. A peripheral paranormal, perhaps? But at around the same time, my brother was all alone sitting by the fireplace. He had no clue that I had just seen one and was telling our mother. He just felt uneasy and remembered looking to his left and seeing a huge shadow sitting as if it were next to him. He remembers thinking, "That's just my shadow from the fire." He moved his torso down and the shadow went the opposite way. He got a little freaked out and lifted his back to go the other way, and from what he said, the shadow didn't move. He just noped and sprinted out towards my mother. I never disregarded his story because I used to deal with the same thing, and also because he ran to my mother to tell her what happened mere moments after I told her I had just seen one at a separate section of the house. Again, our poor mother. Anyway, sorry for the long story. As an adult, I remember bringing this up to our mother and asking if she remembers us doing this. She got wide-eyed and said, "Yeah, that crap was scary." And it was hilarious hearing her tell me as an adult that she was terrified and all the good, bad spirit stuff was horse crap. She just didn't know what else to tell her creepy twins. I've never really visited this subreddit before, but I wanted to share this story with someone. I really can't find a reasonable explanation for what happened that night. It was just a very strange and alarming experience. This all happened a few months ago. My friend had heard that the northern lights might be visible in our area and asked if I wanted to go for a drive out into the country to see if we could maybe catch a glimpse. So we headed out after dark and drove for a while, putting the city behind us and winding out into the countryside, all the while scanning the skies and just searching for a good vantage point where the stars and the lights might be visible. But several hours passed, and with nothing to show for our efforts, we started to give up on seeing the lights altogether. As we discussed what to do next at that point, my friend noted that we were close to her hometown, and reminded me that she had been wanting to visit the local cemetery to find the graves of some of her distant relatives. She had recently been researching her genealogy. It was a clear, warm night, and we were both pretty disappointed that we hadn't seen the lights. We both wanted to make this trip worthwhile, so we agreed to swing by the cemetery. We pulled onto the dirt road adjacent to the cemetery and walked around until we found the right graves. She took some photos, and we decided to just wander around for a little while. My friend was leading the way, using the flashlight on her phone to light the path and to ensure that we didn't accidentally step on any of the graves. I had been feeling increasingly anxious since we arrived, which did strike me as a bit odd. I have done several cemetery seriation projects as an archaeologist and don't normally feel nervous about cemeteries, even at night. In fact, I usually find that cemeteries are pretty peaceful and calming, but I felt really strange in that particular graveyard, and found myself frequently spinning around because I felt like somebody was standing behind me. Still, I just chalked it up to general anxiety, and I tried not to dwell on it. One of the problems with having an anxiety disorder is that it's sometimes hard to tell when your nervousness is justified. Even in retrospect, I don't know if my anxiety was just in my head, or if it was related to what would happen next. After wandering for a while, we realized that it was approaching 1 a.m. and that we should probably get back home. We turned back and headed toward the car. My friend's car was in sight, and she was a few yards ahead of me when it happened. I suddenly got a wave of that nervous feeling again, and thought I heard someone running up behind me. I was starting to turn my head to look back when I felt something collide with my back, the initial impact hitting me right between the shoulder blades. There was a substantial weight behind it, as if somebody had actually hurtled into me. The impact was so forceful that I was thrown forward and fell flat on my face, and as I scrambled to get back up, I felt the weight pressing onto my shoulders again and was shoved back down. I then glanced up to see my friend running toward me. She had also heard someone running up to us, had heard my initial fall, and had turned just in time to see me being pushed back down. She would later tell me that she had seen my sweatshirt flattening against my back and shifting, as if somebody had been pressing their hands against my shoulders. She grabbed my arm to pull me up just as the weight disappeared, and we both bolted toward the car, jumping in and instinctively locking the doors. She wasted no time starting the engine and then hastily peeled out of the driveway. As soon as we hit the main road, we just sped away from there as quickly as we possibly could. We drove for several minutes without saying a word. I think we were both stunned and, more than anything, confused. She finally glanced at me and said, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't quite know the answer to that. I told her that someone had shoved me to the ground, and she said, "I know, I saw, but what was that? There was nothing there." We tried to come up with a rational explanation, but none of them made any sense. Had someone ambushed me and then bolted? Definitely not. We would have seen them. Had I tripped? No, I definitely felt something pushing me, and my friend had seen me being shoved back down. Had it been the wind? Not possible. There hadn't been so much as a breeze that night, and if there had been some freak gust of wind, it would have hit my friend too. Perhaps an animal had attacked me? That didn't seem possible either. There were no local animals large enough, strong enough, and stealthy enough to topple a full-grown human without being seen. I had been in full view of my friend, illuminated by her flashlight, during the second fall, and the weight had remained at my shoulders even as she was coming right up to me. She should have been able to see whatever had been pushing me. If nothing else, an animal would have cast a visible shadow beneath the glare of her flashlight. But there was nothing. We just couldn't explain it. Whatever had pushed me, twice, hadn't been visible to us. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed something else. My back hurt. Right between my shoulder blades, right where I had felt the impact. I could feel a sort of stinging, prickly sensation. It felt like my back, despite being covered by my sweatshirt, had somehow been brushed with stinging nettles. I mentioned this to my friend, and she insisted on pulling over to the side of the road to look at my back. She switched the hood light on in the car and pulled the collar of my hoodie down to look, and I heard her mutter, "What the hell?" She took a photo of my back and showed it to me. The skin between my shoulder blades was reddened, and several little blisters had started to appear. In the days that followed, the blisters would later swell up and pop. It was as if I had somehow gotten a sunburn or a bad chemical burn. There weren't any scratches or cuts, there were no open wounds, no blood. It was a relatively subtle mark, but it was still very clearly there, and it baffled us. We certainly couldn't figure out how I'd gotten burned. I hadn't rubbed up against anything, I hadn't touched my back, I'd been wearing my hoodie all night and there were no tears or marks in the fabric, and the burn hurt. It continued to sting for several days. You can see the photo here. I couldn't sleep that night. My back hurt, and every time I started to drift off, I would suddenly begin to fear that someone was standing over my shoulder, and I would startle awake. I couldn't really understand what had happened at the cemetery, and it truly rattled me. I don't exactly know where I stand on the issue of paranormal phenomena, just to be honest. As an anthropologist, I'm trained to keep an open mind, but I still have to rely on a deeply academic and often empirical perspective. Still, I know that something truly bizarre and frightening happened that night, and my inability to explain it, to account for every strange little detail, has been very disturbing. It's also been especially difficult to grapple with this because I already have PTSD from a previous assault, and there is something profoundly unsettling about the fact that, in this instance, there is nothing I could have done to defend myself. And with no clear explanation for it, there is no way for me to prevent something like this from ever happening again. I cannot cope with a fear that I can't even begin to understand. It's also begun to affect my dreams. I've had several odd nightmares since the incident in the cemetery. Dreams that are oddly similar to the nightmares that I've had for years when I was growing up. I don't know where they came from, but for as long as I can remember, I've had dreams in which a creature is attempting to lure me in one way or another, and in the dreams, I usually understand this creature to be a devil or a demon. Simply put, something evil, something dangerous, and, like the entity in the graveyard, difficult to understand. These dreams have become suddenly relevant again, as I seem to have them nearly every time I fall asleep these days. I know that, likely due to trauma, hopefully not due to anything more sinister, these dreams and the experience in the graveyard are somehow linked. Sometimes the menacing creature in my dreams takes the form of an old woman. I had one dream when I was 13 years old in which I was wandering through a forest. I came across a little cottage with this old woman standing by the porch. She beckoned me inside, I acquiesced. We spent some time casually talking and baking cookies, but I felt uneasy around her, and I got the sense that she wanted something from me. We stayed only in the kitchen throughout the dream, but I can recall glancing at the doorway to other rooms and seeing nothing but shadowy edges. I thought that perhaps I should try to leave, but I couldn't remember how to find my way out. At one point, we sat at the kitchen table. I glanced out the window and I noticed a group of people standing in the yard, calling out to the old woman. I asked who these people were, and she told me, "They want me to take them in, but I don't want them. I want you." In other dreams, it has had a more sinister appearance, but I always recognize it as the same creature. I sometimes have dreams in which it is sitting in the dark at my bedside, whispering to me. It has a shadowy appearance with long, lanky limbs and empty eye sockets. Its teeth are made of razor wire, and there is something like blood or wine gleaming on the lips. Like this. In those dreams, I can hear it whispering, but I can't understand what it's saying. Sometimes I have dreams of the same creature sitting in a chair in the corner of my room, eating what seems to be a rotten apple. I have long suspected that this creature is some manifestation of my deepest and most troubling fears. I know these are just dreams, but I mention it because those dreams had subsided in my early 20s, but the incident at the cemetery rattled me so much that they have returned. It seems to have shaken my understanding of the world around me, opening the floodgates to my own inner demons. In these new dreams, that creature is standing upright behind me at the cemetery. Time seems to be slowing down. I can sense my friend frozen ahead of me and the creature is whispering at my back. I don't really know why my mind is conflating that dream creature with my encounter in the cemetery, but the fear has increasingly kept me up at night. I have no idea what the hell happened that night. My friend believes it was a ghost, but I just don't know. I've just never personally experienced anything like this, and I don't really know what to do with it. This next story actually comes from another YouTube narrator named Stay Scared. I've actually featured one of their stories before, and I've linked to them in the description. However, I am going to link them in the description again, and I'm going to have a subscribe button at the end of the video for the last 20 seconds there at the end screen. So if you would, very kindly, please consider going to their channel, subscribing, listening to the things they've done, and yeah, just show them the love you guys always show me. That's kind of what I'm going for. Alright, let's get this going. I used to date this girl named Jessica, but she ran track in school, so everyone just called her Speedy. One night, we were hanging out at my apartment just drinking and watching movies. We both passed out pretty early that night. I woke up and I noticed that Speedy wasn't in bed. I looked out in the hallway and could see a little bit of light shining from beneath the bathroom door. Speedy obviously just had to use the bathroom. That was my only thought. So I rolled over onto my side and I tried to go back to sleep. A few moments later, I heard the toilet flush, the sink turn on and then off, and then the bathroom door slowly open. But what I didn't hear was Speedy's footsteps walking back to the bedroom. So I turned back towards the hallway, and I could see Speedy's dark, shadowy figure standing in the hallway. I sat up and called out to her, "Hey, Speedy, come on, come to bed." The shadowy figure instantly sunk straight into the floor. I jumped out of bed, terrified. I had no idea what the hell I had just witnessed, but what's worse, Speedy was in the bed next to me the whole time. Welcome back, dear listener. I hope you enjoyed this collection of terrifyingly true paranormal stories. I know I did, obviously. I always love narrating paranormal stories because they're there's always just this weird sense of anticipation and obviously that overwhelming sense of what's happening. Is it, why is this terrifying to me? Regardless of what you believe, these stories are always interesting. I love narrating them, and I'm glad that the wonderful people on Reddit are typically willing to let me do so. That said, if you all enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, give it a thumbs up there. That does a lot more than you will ever know, trust me. Consider subscribing to the channel so that I know that you're interested in more content like this, because I love this so much, you have no idea. And then also please consider leaving me a comment. I would love to hear from you. I know I say that every time. It is just as sincere, and whatever video this is, 14 I think, it is just as sincere 14 times in as it was the first time. Trust me, I love reading comments. I love replying to every single one of them. Just let me know what you think, how you're doing, what's up, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so, well, I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed, but until the next one, sleep well.